everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of Blood Matters, a podcast for nurses. My name is Emma, and as always, I am joined by Michelle. Hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
Hi, Emma. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I am doing all right, actually. I'm actually busy, but I think we all are, aren't we? I think this is
Yeah.
the time of year for it. And actually, really, that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is how busy you've been over the last few weeks. It's been a little hectic, I feel, for you. A little well, have you spent much time at home?
Well, a little bit in between work and short trips. I think that's the thing. I think the meetings, although September's a very, very busy meetings month, the meetings are relatively short. So,
Yeah.
for people who are wanting to kind of think about attending those, pick up one of those meetings next year in 2024. You can kind of fit it in at the beginning of the weekend, and then still have, either spend a day in whatever city or, have a day at home before the week starts again if your week starts on a Monday. So it's been very busy, but September is always a busy EBMT month. So I think after the sort of quiet times of COVID, I kind of feel mindful of certainly not complaining about seeing people in person, because that is one of the joys of having meetings where we now do have the opportunity to be together in the real world. But it just, it's not as convenient as sitting at home at your kitchen table with your computer.
It's not, but it's a whole other experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a whole other thing. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions probably in a little bit about where you've been, what you've been up to, and what maybe some of your highlights were. But for those listening, thank you very much for joining us again. This podcast episode, what we really wanted to do was actually kind of take a little opportunity to look back, have a look over the things that we've discussed, the places that we've been, meetings we've been at, talk about some of our favorite things. And then we will also give you a little taster of what's to come, what's coming later in the rest of this year, and then what's going to happen in 2024. The year is steadily creeping away. It's turning into autumn here in Scotland. All the leaves are falling off. So it's suddenly now starting to come to a close. So nice opportunity, I think, for us to kind of say where we've been and where we're going.
Yeah, I definitely. And I can't believe that this time last year we started to talk about whether this was going to be a thing, and whether you were interested in doing this, and neither of us had ever been in this position before, where we were looking down the barrel of a podcast. And now October 2023, there are 7 Blood Matters podcasts out there in the ether. We've had about 2,000 views, probably more than that now. So do keep sharing the links to the pods with colleagues if you're a regular listener. And if you're not a regular listener, let us know why not. We're always looking for new ideas and ways that we can tweak things around the edges. Do let us know what you think. Any suggestions for future pods? Always happy to hear those. We've quite a lot of ideas we're going to share with you a little bit later on in the pod today. So Emma, I'm going to ask you a question, because you always ask the questions.
I feel like a guest on my own podcast.
I know. Well, you are today. You are today. You get,
and so are you.
You get to sit in that seat. So, favorite podcast?
Oh, I'm taking us back to February when we recorded it. In February, we did release it a little bit later. It was the Let's Talk About Sex podcast with John and Angie from Manchester. It's a personal, probably a personal frustration of mine that we don't do enough talking about sex with our patients, that we assume that fitting into the role of a patient means that you're not going to be a sexual being, and that you're not going to want to have a sexual or an intimate relationship with a person or with your partner, or any way that that is structured for you as an individual. So I absolutely, I loved that podcast. I really loved that conversation that we had, and was furiously scribbling notes, as I generally do in most of them, of things that I could suggest to my colleagues, and resources and places. So that's my personal favorite, but I can't say I've not enjoyed any of them.
Yeah, they've all been great. And if you were sort of thinking about that pod, and we were to revisit the topic of sex and sexuality and sexual function again in the future, what do you think that you'd like to hear about in that pod that we didn't perhaps grab the first time
so
around?
I think what we did really well was discussing the issues that nurses have in feeling comfortable about bringing up those conversations. What I would like to see us maybe do in the future, and if people are interested, as we're going to say quite a lot today, tell us, is more about the tools that are available out there, the tools that nurses could use to feel even further empowered, or to be able to give that advice and not necessarily only say, not actually sure I know the answer to that question, which is not a bad thing to say to a patient. If you don't know the answer, it's great to say, I'm sorry, I don't actually know the answer to that question, instead of making it up on the fly. But certainly I think that if we could find some more things for nurses to be able to use, and places to go, or for them to feel comfortable in really using language that's maybe not usual for them to use. So we won't go into it today, obviously, because maybe it's a future podcast episode. But certainly that's what I think I would like to see us building up on that episode, on using what John and Angie said, and giving people a toolkit to be able to have those discussions with their patients.
Yeah, almost like a kind of top tips about.
Yeah, I love a
about
top
sex.
tips.
That's a bit of a tongue twister that could easily go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But well, maybe there's an educational resource in the offing there as well that we can
May have
develop
just volunteered myself to do something. Who knows?
and
It happens
get
a lot.
on the website. So that's
Yeah.
I think that would be certainly really good. Whenever we do educational sessions at any of the meetings around sex, they're always very, very well received, and for me that says a lot about where that gap is in knowledge and experience and confidence. So you can know it all, you can be many years served, but having the confidence to talk about these issues with patients and their partners can be really intimidating. So I think that there's a place to go there, I think, with a resource.
Well,
Awesome.
I guess I'm going to throw that question back to you then, Michelle. Favorite podcast so far? If you say sex and intimacy, then we've got a really short podcast today, but I suspect you're not.
I know. I mean, like you, I've really enjoyed them all. I made a little list of all the pods and our guests before we started press the record button on this one today. And honestly, each and every one of them really evokes some strong memories in me of how we kind of chatted with the guests, and kind of really in awe of all of the experts. So I might even say that I can't choose one. Is that allowed?
Okay.
Am I allowed to say that?
You are allowed to say, yeah, absolutely. This is not a favoritism thing. So John and Angie, if you're listening, as I hope you are, this is not me saying they're my favorite guests, just that I loved your app. But yeah, Michelle, if it's too hard to pick, that's saying something really good for us, isn't it?
People that know me know that I don't sit on the fence very often. I'm not shy. I'm quite happy to share my views and my opinions, but I honestly can't choose because each one of the pods really means something to me, and I learned something in each and every one of those pods. So I think that's my challenge to people that listen in. If you don't learn anything from listening to one of these, even just a small nugget of information that you can take back to practice, then let us know and tell us what it is that you want to know from these pods, because I think that's really important. I love the recap of the annual meeting. It was our first meeting together, and I still feel really excited when I think about and reflect on the annual meeting. I loved hearing from Anna Sereda and about her role as president of EBMT. It's not science. It's not going to improve the care that you offer at the bedside, but I think look inside what happens within EBMT, I think is, I think it felt like a real privilege to me to hear from her. Sex, yes, absolutely. John and Angie really did the topic proud, and I think there's still more to do there. Myeloma in 2023. Now I'm just doing a recap of the podcast, aren't I? But I loved. Cool. I loved listening to Graham. He's got another great accent for the pod. And Micah, and I don't think Graham and Micah know each other particularly well. So I think prior to the myeloma pod, most of our guests knew each other on some level, but I don't think Graham and Micah really knew each other, and that combo just worked so well. There was real podcast chemistry was brilliant. It was really, really good. And Graham's such like Anna, who is actually the only other doctor that we've had on the pod, is a real advocate for nursing and nurses, and again that came across really strong. So that was great. I really enjoyed that, and I learned a lot. Again, so good to have the opportunity to learn easily.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, I write on my notes all the time when I'm sitting on the podcast. The writing's illegible because I'm trying not to look like I'm not paying attention to the podcast. But I've learned something. I never, like you say, never go away without learning more than one thing for me. Certainly in terms of our pods, even on something I think I know reasonably well. You pick something out, don't you?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's the idea of asking experts, right? Because they're people that have been identified, not necessarily always by us, as having real knowledge in the field, and having the expertise that we can tap into, and we can ask the questions. And it might be that when we get towards the end of this pod, as we talk about what we've got planned for early 2024, that people want to send in some questions. Maybe we can ask some more difficult questions of our guests. So we'd be very happy for people to send in questions. I think, and I don't really know how this works, because this is not my area of expertise, but I believe on Spotify people can rate the pod, and I've seen some of the ratings actually for the pod,
and you can comment on YouTube as well.
We're doing quite well, but you could feedback onto Spotify some of the questions, some suggestions for topics if you don't want to contact us directly through EBMT or on the Twitter, and feeding back on YouTube as well. So absolutely. We really want to make this a podcast that gives something back to the people that are listening.
And neither Michelle or I will be shy about asking any of your questions. If you think, I don't know if I want to ask that question, is it too contentious? Is it a lot of people say to me all the time, I've got a stupid question. I don't believe there's ever such a thing.
No, because if you've asked that question, you're going to improve your knowledge. There's nothing stupid about that.
No. We'll ask the questions. We will be the ones asking the questions. And, we're very happy to do it. So do send in your questions. I suppose while we're breaking down the pods, then I might go through the rest of the list, because I've also written them all down. So the one we did next was actually CAR-T,
Yeah,
and that was amazing. So we had Ruth and we had Mariola.
yeah,
So we had like an adult and a pediatric perspective, which was fantastic. And I know certainly that again, I'm not a pediatric nurse. I didn't know as much as I maybe knew about adult nursing in terms of CAR-T, but then even then I was picking things up from Ruth. So that was a really good one. And it was quite nice to think about linking that back to the meeting we had earlier in the year, but let's talk about meetings in a little bit because
yeah,
you've been to some that I want to hear about in September. So yeah, that was our CAR-T podcast. We then did a really good session on nutritional impacts of, in particular, stem cell transplants, but we're really kind of talking about any of these cellular therapies, weren't we? So we
yeah,
had Nicola and we had Crystal, and I have been throwing the idea of taste boxes all around my service. They're probably sick of me saying taste boxes to people, and what's that? And I'm like, listen to the podcast. Christelle told us it really well. And I thought it's just such a good idea. It's such a
yeah,
relaxed way of trying to get someone to maybe have to relearn a palate that they've lost because we've
yeah,
damaged their taste buds or receptors and they're struggling. And then our most recent, which was super interesting, was about abstract writing.
yeah,
And well, just well, we had Annika, we had Marique. So we've had Marique a couple of times now. She's a brilliant guest. And I've got about 5 abstract ideas just in my brain. They just they've got free real estate now in my head, and at some point I may end up looking around and seeing what I can do. I'm going to finish my studies this year first, but I don't know about you, Michelle. You've probably always got abstract ideas bouncing around your head, but
I
they're
do, I
they're a
do.
new thing for me.
I did when I had my sort of first role within EBMT was within the scientific committee, and I was very excited and enthusiastic, and at that time I thought oh yes, I might be part of the meeting. I wasn't quite sure what the role would really involve at that stage. So I submitted a couple of abstracts and I volunteered to chair the educational day. My goodness me, my feet did not touch the ground. I was so I haven't submitted any abstracts since then, since I've been involved with EBMT. But of course, I have supported lots of people to submit and develop their ideas into abstracts, which I enjoy probably more than writing my own
Yeah,
abstract.
yeah,
And it's my way of being able to give back a little bit of what I've learned over the years, privileged position that I've been in within EBMT and the various roles that I've been fortunate to hold. And as a result, you learn a lot, and
oh yeah,
you can share that knowledge with other people. And I feel very lucky to be able to do that. But yeah, the abstract writing, it's a craft. But the pod really helped to break down some of the myths around
definitely.
abstract writing. Read their guidelines. It was
Yes.
it was Annika's mantra, and getting a peer, getting a
Yeah,
colleague to
having a
read
friend
it
to look at it.
before you send it in.
Yeah,
Get somebody to sense check it. We all have amazing ideas, and you write stuff down. You can write a page of total nonsense and you think it makes complete sense. I'm sure that
it
never
does not
happens to you,
translate.
Emma, but
Oh, it will.
yeah, certainly been guilty of that a few times. So yeah, the abstract writing pod was great, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed CAR-T with Ruth and Mariola. Again, touching on some of those things where people feel a little less certain in the CAR-T
Mhm.
world. I thought was great, and the nutritional pod with the taste boxes, and actually offering patients a way of being able to have fun with food.
Right.
Food
Yeah.
just stops being enjoyable
It's not
and
a
it
chore anymore
becomes
if you make it fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And Nicola was absolutely straight up with the guidelines
Yeah.
around clean diet and abolishing some of those barriers that are there to supporting patients with nutrition after transplant cell therapy. Yeah, what a joy it's been.
What a start to our pod that
Yeah,
we're hoping will go on for many years to come.
yeah.
I mean, I'm here as long as everyone will have me. And I suppose just I'm going to take this little opportunity to remind people that if you haven't listened to those podcasts and maybe this is your first with us, and we've just gone and told you about loads of really cool and interesting topics, you can find all of the back catalogue on Spotify and on YouTube. So go back, go listen. You don't have to listen to anything in a particular order. This is not a series that needs you to listen to podcast 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You can do it whatever way you want. You can skip ones that don't necessarily interest you. But I do promise you'll learn something if you listen to something that doesn't necessarily feel like it's relevant or will be interesting. It will. It will. And I'm not just saying that. Am I, Michelle? I'm not. I'm
No,
not.
not at all. Not at all.
Okay, so before we talk about the future, should we talk about the past a little bit? A little bit more of the past. So we said at the very beginning, you've had a really busy month. I've not. I've just been working away in the background. But where have you been? What have you been up to? Do you want to tell the listeners and me, because I've not heard any of these breakdowns yet. This is new to me as well.
Yeah,
What you've been up to?
yeah, I'm on the spot now. I'm on the
You are a
spot.
little bit.
So I need to remember. I really need to remember. So September started out as it always does with the International Transplant and Cell Therapy course, which has been held in Barcelona for the last number of years since it started as a program, and it's really a program for trainee physicians. But we're fortunate enough also to have a one-day nurses education track
Amazing.
on that as well. And we it's usually a small group, so it's a bit of a masterclass kind of
Okay.
Genre really, and we kind of whiz through the JC competencies for nurses. That's kind of the framework for the program, and we bring in a load of experts to summarize what nurses who are looking after the patients in transplant programs and cell therapy programs, to summarize what they need to know. And we had some great speakers as always this year, focusing on things like graft versus host disease. We did something on bikes and cars. We did sessions on infection, advanced care planning, sex. We had a session on sex as well, very topical.
Should have been there.
So yeah, so it was great, and the attendees were really interactive, and there was a real buzz in the room, and we had a great day. And then just prior to that, in Barcelona, we used the opportunity that a lot of our scientific committee were going to be in Barcelona because they organise with the Nurses Group Board that International Transplant and Cell Therapy course meeting. We had our annual board and all committees meeting as well. So that's kind of our Nurses Group business meeting for the year, where we all get together and we kind of talk about stuff that we've done and planning projects for the futures. And our committees get to meet together in person on their own, and we all kind of meet together in a big room. And this year it felt very, very productive and very collaborative, and was just a great opportunity. We had so much to talk about. We overran by about 3 hours. but because a lot of people were staying on for the ITC, we had the luxury of being able to do that. So that was great. And then the following weekend, I was fortunate enough to be invited to one of the panels for the transplant complications working party meeting, which was in Copenhagen. And that was probably one of my favorite working party meetings, if I'm honest. Although I haven't been invited to many of the others. But it's a great meeting because they cover off acute complications, chronic complications, late effects, and patient-reported outcomes, and there's a real focus in that meeting on the care that we provide to patients and what that means to them in terms of what is quality of life, what does that mean to a patient, what are the things that our patients value, that they're important to them, and so that really resonates with me and a lot of the work that I do in my clinical role. So I particularly enjoy that meeting, and it was it's great. And while I was there, we also had the second EBMT China nurses group meeting, and we had representation from the nurses group in China this time. In fact, Marique and Mariola were fortunate enough to present in person at the meeting. I couldn't be in China because I was in Copenhagen, so I did the online opening and closing of that meeting in between sessions in Copenhagen. And I was slightly anxious because I wasn't quite sure that the timings were all going to work until I hit the ground, but was familiar with the CET in Copenhagen. So, but that all worked great. And the meeting in China, I caught a few bits of it. It was great. They focused on just 2 or 3 topics, key topics. And it was a real practice sharing opportunity for EBMT nurses and nurses from China, and that worked really, really well. So a very, very valuable meeting. So that was great. 2 meetings in one, and then finally we had the EBMT Nurses Group annual education meeting last weekend in Madrid. We had around 120, 130 people in the room all together, and anybody who follows at the EBMT nurses on Twitter would see a picture of all the delegates and speakers that we posted during the meeting, and it was a brilliant atmosphere. It was great. We had translation. In fact, we had translation as well at the ITC for the nurses track. So we had Spanish translation in Barcelona, and we also had Spanish translation and English translation in Madrid. So we had some speakers who were presenting in Spanish and some presenting in English, and that all worked brilliantly. One of the things that we're doing with our meetings is we're working hard to try to make them more accessible for nurses. We really have heard loud and clear the feedback that we have had over previous years and from previous meetings, and this is something that we're going to try to offer for all of the meetings that we have a nurses group program at going forward. So we need feedback about that as well, and what that means to people. And we are currently planning our annual education meeting for 2024, which we are hoping is going to be in Italy.
Ooh,
we haven't yet booked. We haven't yet booked, got the venue booked, so I can't tell you which city we're going to be in. But again, that's usually an autumn meeting, so September, October time. And we're collaborating with the Gitmo Italian Nurses Group to bring that meeting together. And this year, our meeting in Madrid, we collaborated with the Spanish Nurses Group. And I just want to say a huge thanks to the EBMT team who helped to support bringing that meeting together. And also our local organisers were led by Julia Ruiz and Isabel Salcedo, both of whom are on EBMT committees. It's not always the way. The programme is also a collaboration with our research committee, and it was a superb programme. It was really great with some amazing speakers. So really high quality meeting, great education, and a great educational opportunity. And that is what we'll be doing more of next year.
I'm sad that I missed them. I had all sorts of best laid plans that all just kind of went a bit catastrophic, so I couldn't make the meetings.
You had some holidays, didn't you? You had a bit of holiday.
Sort of, yeah. Yeah. But 2024 might be my year. No, it's going to be my year. I've decided already. It's going to be my year. You'll be sick of seeing me, Michelle, face to face. You're already probably very used to seeing me on online platforms. Well, I mean, I'm hoping that October is a little bit calmer for you, at least, because it seems like it was a bit hectic last month, and we're all in the planning stages for next year, really. Well, some things are already planned and ready to go almost because they're early in the year, but later in the year things are in the planning stages. Amazing. So well, I guess what should we talk about next? We've got a couple of things.
I mean, I guess you kind of segue into talking a bit about meetings for next year. So we're just putting the finishing touches to our CAR-T programme. So Nurses Group have a joint CAR-T programme with HNHCP at the EBMT EHA CAR-T meeting, which is going to be in Valencia in February. And we also have, of course, the EBMT annual meeting. EBMT will be 50 next year.
Should we have a cake? Should we have a cake?
I mean, I don't know what is planned.
I only live one city over. I'll bring a cake.
I wouldn't possibly be able to leak anything of the plans for next year.
I'll bring Anna a cake at least.
There will be some exciting events planned to celebrate the 50th year of EBMT. But also the Nurses Group will be 40 years old,
which is amazing. I'll bring you a cake as well, then.
And I mean, if I think, I was just a small child when some really inspirational nurses were starting to develop the EBMT Nurses Group, and I find that I'm in awe of that, the kind of real bravery probably of those nurses, and tenacity of those nurses to ensure that nurse education is brought to the same platform as physician education, and in a collaborative way, and that has set the tone for EBMT and EBMT Nurses Group going forward, and I'm proud that to be an EBMT nurse, and to be able to continue with some of that and work that was really begun by some incredible people. So lots to celebrate in April in Glasgow in 2024.
So have your diaries ready and marked for that, guys. If you've not already planned to go, get yourselves planning to go.
You referred a bit earlier, Emma, to abstract writing. If you've got abstracts in the planning and ideas on the go, then yes, of course, listen to the podcast and make sure you read guidelines. But the closing date for the abstract submission is the 17th of December. So we've given nurses and allied health professionals a little bit more time this year. In previous years, the abstract closing for nurses happened about a month before the physician's closing date. We have, for the first time, made a very brave decision, but seemingly wise decision, to bring the nurses group abstract closing in line with the rest of the abstract closing. It makes a lot of sense. It's giving people a bit more time after the summer breaks to be able to get together their brains and their pens or laptops and write those abstracts and submit them. So we are really hoping that makes a huge difference to people's ability to get their abstracts in, share your work, share your ideas, share the practice, and really help to educate and share that learning across our community.
And we do give out prizes for top abstracts and various
We
other,
do.
I mean, it's not just top abstracts, is it? But there's there's celebration of abstracts as well on the day. And I remember that from last year, thinking that's amazing that we're celebrating the achievements. And I would celebrate just having an abstract accepted anyway, but if I got a little prize as well, I'd be very happy. I would be made up.
Yeah. So we give, it's a cash prize for our abstract award winners, which are announced at our closing of the annual meeting. That's on the Wednesday, kind of the end of our programme around lunchtime. And those abstracts, those best abstracts that are selected for orals go into the special abstract presentation sessions where we have our judges. They're a bit like secret shoppers. They're sitting in the audience. They're not on the chairing panel. They're sitting in the audience and they're scoring the presentation. So the abstracts are usually the top scoring abstracts. They're collected into sessions, and then our judges are sitting there in those sessions, scoring them and judging the presentations that come through. And the thing I really love about that is not only do we have our general oral abstract best sessions, we also have one for research abstract. So if you're doing research, then we have an awards session for research abstracts as well, and pediatric. So we want to be able to acknowledge work that is great and a cut above some of the other work, and that kind of competitiveness continues to the presentation in the meeting. So it's great, and those are usually really, really amazing presentations. And I love that we're also able to give poster awards as well. So it's not just people that choose to do or are selected for oral presentations at the meeting that can potentially win awards. We also have pediatric and adult posters as well. So that's also great. And one of the things I love, I've as president, you get to do lots of lovely jobs. You get to do quite a lot of not so lovely jobs, but you do get to do quite a lot of really nice things. And it's really, really nice to present those awards at the end of the meeting. And all of the award winners, certainly when I was doing this last year for the first time in person, everybody's so surprised that they think it's going to be somebody else, and it's commendable, really. Very typical for nurses, I think, as well, that they don't recognize the greatness of their own work. There's something actually that I find quite humbling about that it's a really lovely moment, a real privilege again.
So actually, one of our always goals is going to be continuing to promote the good work that nurses do. This is our way of doing it, but there are other ways of it being done. And so get those abstracts in, guys. You've got another 2-ish months to do it or so. So go for it. Might be a little bit less time by the time this pod comes out, but I have faith in you guys. So we've got a real plan for next year. I think the early year is always my exciting time of year. I love CAR-T conference and I love annual meetings, so I will be aiming for those. But then the further back end of the year, September, maybe guys just assign yourself a full month of September for study, because you could keep yourself very, very busy by going to various meetings. So we've got some ideas for the next few pods. We'll tell the listeners about what pods we've got coming up, and then some of our ideas, and then if anything marries up with people, or they think, well, if you're doing that, let's do this as well. We've said it already in the pod today, but please get in touch, please let us know. So the next few that we're going to be recording, we've got a plan on doing the psychological well-being of those of you looking after patients receiving cellular therapies, transplants, etc. I think that's quite an important topic, isn't it, Michelle? We think we can sometimes be very good at looking after the patient's best interests, but we can't do that to the best of our ability if we're also not looking after ourselves very well. So I think that one's going to be might be a difficult thing to discuss, but it's super important, super relevant to, I think, everybody. We've all been through 3 years of a horrible pandemic that isn't gone. There's a little bit of a new normal, isn't there? But it's not disappeared. We're not, there's no, it's not vanished. And everyone was a hero during, but we have to recognize that everyone was a hero before it and are going to continue to be heroes. So,
and there is a real emotional toil, isn't there, around this work that isn't necessarily very openly recognised. And I think that it's important to talk about it, to bring it to the open, to encourage people to be able to talk about their experiences. And hopefully the pod, well, I'm sure the pod is going to give people ideas around kind of validating some of their thoughts and feelings, understanding, how to talk about those, how to articulate those, where to get help, and, the importance of self-care. So, really looking forward to that.
I think we'll obviously do a bit more deep diving into it on the actual pod, so come back for that one, guys. Another one, and probably what will seem to be a slightly happier note, is looking at those advanced roles that nurses can go into as within the transplant community. What can we develop ourselves into being, or going down career routes? So we're going to have some guests around about that, aren't we? We're going to look at the next generation of nurses. We should do that all the time, but I think that one's going to be really fun and give people a lot of ideas, and maybe something that they haven't considered in the past, but now maybe will, because we've given them the idea.
No, that's going to be really interesting, actually. I think, again, there are some real opportunities, but also a lot of barriers for nurses across Europe. And think that there's a lot about advanced practice roles that is really attractive for nurses, but the actual doing of them in the environment that they are carried out in, and it's often quite difficult. And so we're going to talk about some of that, and around, how people overcome some of those challenges, by asking our guests how they have overcome some of those challenges, and put structures in place around the kind of professional credibility that they've been able to acquire through delivery of those roles. So I think it's going to be interesting.
So how do you become the expert that gets to be a guest on our podcast, really?
Yeah.
in any part of the of transplant caring or transplant care. So very short further list for you guys, which we will hope that you will help us build upon. We would love to do another pod in the similar vein as to how we did the myeloma in 2023, but looking at lymphoma. But that will obviously be in 2024 and beyond. We definitely think there's a place for a podcast looking at graft versus host disease as one of the major complications following some of our transplants. We would like to look at the liver toxicities, so your veno-occlusive disease. We've also thought about the sort of skin and endothelial problems that can occur post-transplant. That is a very short list, guys, and we do want you to help us shape this podcast. We're very dynamic. We aren't rigid and structured. We aren't saying, that we will tell you what you will be listening to. We want you to tell us what you want to listen to, because it's for you. We are just the facilitators and the people asking those questions, but the pod is for you. So please do tell us what it is that you would like to learn about in the future so that we can keep it going for many years, as is my ultimate goal in life, is to have a very long podcast where I'm a little old lady croaking into the microphone at 75 years old plus, still asking questions about stem cell transplants and what we can do. It'll be very different by then, though, I would hope. I would suspect. Maybe my retirement plan might be just to continue the podcast forever and ever.
That's brilliant.
But I'm not retiring yet, guys. I'm a little far away from that.
Great.
Well,
I mean, I think we can leave it there, Emma.
I feel that I'm you guys know we're very excited about our podcast. I don't think we're ever going to not have that energy about this pod, are we, Michelle? We love doing this, and we love that you love what we're doing. But feedback is so important because it helps us to build it the way that you want it to be built. So as I've enjoyed having a little look back over what we've done so far, but we've got much more to come. Any last thoughts about our little project here so far, Michelle? What do you think?
No, I mean, only that it's been great opportunity. I'm glad we're reaching people. It'd be great to reach some more people. It'd be great to have more feedback. Send your questions in, ideas for topics, and we look forward to the next podcast.
I will say that if you're looking for any more educational opportunities and it's beyond things like the meetings or the pod at the moment, go to the EBMT website. There is masses of e-learning on there that you can go and explore at your own leisure, at your own time. So please do go and check that out, and there'll be something for you depending on what your area of specialty is. There will be something on there for you, and if there isn't, maybe you can help us build it, and we will quite happily look into that. I think before we close off this podcast, I want to say thank you as always to you, Michelle, for this really cool conversation. I think this is the most I've ever spoken on a podcast because of the way that we run our podcasts, but it's been really good to do. I would also like to thank the listeners for joining us once again for this podcast, but we have to say a very sad goodbye to one of our colleagues in the background team, Ella Tucker, who is leaving us to go back to Australia, where she's originally from, has promised that she will continue to listen to the podcast, but will no longer be part of the editing team. So we need to give a really massive thanks for all the work that Ella's done with us so far. And you will be sorely missed, Ella. And do come and visit us whenever you're back on the Northern Hemisphere, because you're always welcome to see us.
Send us your feedback, Emma, from the other side of EBMT.
Exactly. What does it sound like in the opposite season to what we're about to experience?
Emma, I think you'll agree we couldn't have done this without Ella's support, and of course Ella is part of a team with Lucina, and it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have their support and working with them on the pod. It really has been amazing. But Ella, we really will miss you, and you have made such a massive difference to this. So we just want to say a huge, enormous thanks.
Ella and Lucina are the ones that do all the magic. We do the talking, they do the magic to make this a podcast and not just two people having a natter on the internet. Well, please join us for the next podcast, and just keep an eye on your subscribe service for it coming out, and have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever you're doing after you've listened to us today, and do take care of yourselves. And Michelle, I'll catch you soon.
Yeah,
bye
indeed.
all.
Thanks a lot, Emma. Bye everyone.